Okay, so our speaker tonight, Steve Sheffield. He's a professor of biology at Bowie State University. I guess I should stay in front of the camera, huh? Professor of biology at Bowie State University. He's a field biologist who holds a Ph.D. in zoology from Oklahoma State University, an MS in wildlife ecology from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental and Estuarian Studies, a BA in zoology from the State University of New York, Oswego. He also completed a postdoctoral pursuit in ecotoxicology at Oak Ridge Nat Laboratory and the Environmental Protection Agency, and has previously served as faculty for Clemson University, Virginia Tech, and George Mason University. He has held research associate positions at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History and Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and is the curator of mammals for the Natural History Society of Mammals. He's also, as John mentioned, our current vice president for Maryland Ornithological Society and serves on a number of committees. Indefatigable, I guess is the term. Dr. Sheffield is a compiler for the spring migratory bird count for Anne Arundel County and covers 5 miles in the C&O Canal for the midwinter bird count, and is an avid Christmas bird count participant having completed 150 to 200 CBCs in 5 states and initiated a count circle in Oklahoma, serving as its compiler for 5 years. So Steve, welcome. And we look forward to hearing about recent advances in owl biology and conservation.
Is that on the microphone? No, no.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction, Greg. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
It's nice to be back here again. I've given a couple of talks here before, a few years back. Not surprisingly, they were all dealing with owls. So I'm not going to deviate from that tonight. So I kind of had never really given a talk like this before. So this is a talk dealing with kind of my efforts to provide you with an overview of an entire scientific conference that lasted a week. So it was a lot more work than I actually thought it was going to be, and I just finished it at 6 o'clock tonight. So it's fresh off the presses. So in any event, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to take you into the meeting. Okay, so you can feel like you're a participant in this meeting. And so what I had to do is kind of limit, because of the length, I can't talk about all of the, 60 plus presentations, but I basically picked, I highlighted a dozen or so that I thought this audience might really like, and I really liked them. And so that's what I'm going to do for you. So first thing is arriving at the meeting. The meeting was in Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin. It was a very nice place. I'll show you a photo of it in a second. I did take a lot of photographs at the meeting, and so that's kind of the basis for me being able to bring you into the meeting so you could see it. So the first thing is to go to the registration desk and I get my name badge. And there's my name badge right there. And I get, as a bonus, I get the Eurasian eagle owl feather on my name tag. So this, because I was the chair of the program committee. So I set up the whole scientific program. And so this is out of all of the scientific meetings I've ever been to probably 150 to 200. This was the absolute nicest name tag I've ever had. It's just sweet. I mean, they made it out of Norwegian spruce. They cut it up into little pieces and etched it. So it's actually World Owl Conference on the back and my name and affiliation on the front. So it's really nice. And while I was at the registration table to sign in, I also was able to grab, let's see here. Yeah, I need this one. There's my meeting t-shirt. And of course, I love cool t-shirts, particularly if they have owls on them. So it's the World Owl Conference t-shirt, and I have one more I'll show you later. Okay, so let's go start the meeting here. So World Owl Conferences. So there has been 7 of them, and they're all outlined here. Starting in '87 in Canada, and the last one was in October, which is the one I'm gonna take you into. So you can see where they've been located: Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, Portugal, India, US. So this one in October was the first one in the US. As far as the next one, and you can see the dates vary a lot. It really depends on who's willing to step up and host it. That's the big thing. You know, if somebody's willing to do all that heavy lifting, then it happens. So look at some of the possibilities for the next meetings. Costa Rica would be wonderful. Slovenia, Germany, Hokkaido, Japan, all those places. I'd be on there in a second. I would be there. So if you're interested and you want to look at the history of these meetings and see, you know, the presentations and everything like that, there's the website right there. So International Owl Center's got all the information on all the past owl conferences. Personally, I have presented papers at the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So the 2nd was my first one. I presented 2 papers up there. And I also went to all the field trips that were available and got my lifer great gray owl and northern hawk owl up there. And they were out in the daytime, and that was really cool. So yeah, I missed the first one was before my time, and the third one was not good timing for me. But so I've been to all the other ones. And they are something, you're basically convening all of the world's owl experts in one place. And this is a really interesting, eclectic group, from just people that just fascinated with owls. They study owls, everything is owls with everyone here. And so it's a fascinating meeting. So this meeting in October was the end of October. It was held at Stony Creek Hotel in La Crosse, Alaska, Wisconsin. We had a little over 130 people in attendance, roughly about 20 countries from 5 continents. Scientific program consisted of a workshop by Wildlife Acoustics. They came in and gave a full half-day workshop on their products and how you would use them to be able to monitor owl audio. We had 4 keynote talks, 57 regular oral talks, 9 posters, and a field trip to the International Owl Center, which was about 20-minute drive away from the meeting site. Our local host, Carla and Hein Blom. Carla was the actual force behind this meeting. Hein just kind of helped her a little bit, but she was the force, and she's the executive director of the International Owl Center. So this is where the meeting was, Stony Creek. I don't know if you've ever been there. There's a whole chain of these up in the Midwest, in the northern Midwest states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and maybe a few other states, but it's absolutely beautiful. It's like an old North Woods motif. The venue is just gorgeous. There's fireplaces every place in the whole building. And this vehicle was spotted in the parking lot. Right there. And that's Carla's vehicle, by the way. So there's the registration desk, there's the t-shirts. We had Jennifer Ackerman there, and she did a book signing for What an Owl Knows, which is a really interesting book. That is Rob Whitmer. He was our AV guy. This guy is not a biologist. He just happens to be a good friend of the International Owl Center, and so he volunteered this whole week to go there and do all the AV for us, which was really amazing. And then this is the stage where we had our presentations. This guy right there is Denver Holt, who is a 40-year plus researcher in owls. done a lot of work with snowy owls as well as long-eared owls. And that's Scott Wiedensaw. You may know who he is. He's also done a lot. I'm going to talk about one of his talks shortly, dealing with snowy owls. And that is right here. There's the meeting logo. And then there's a picture I took with myself and David Johnson and Carla Blome in the middle there. David, I'm going to be talking about one of his talks here also. And you may know David. David's come up here and given a talk here before. So here is our Wildlife Acoustics workshop. And so you can see that they brought lots of different products, and they have a lot of products that they offer. They are a little bit on the pricey side, but they're making smaller ones, so the smaller ones are less expensive, but nonetheless, they took us through all that. And the software is called Kaleidoscope, and they have Kaleidoscope software, so they gave us training on all that. So that was pretty nice. There's a picture that I took opportunistically of all the grad students that were there. So we have graduate students from all over the world here. So you've got, let's see, Canada, India, Czech Republic, Iceland, Portugal, Germany, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Oregon, Canada, Turkey. I mean, you've got just students from everywhere. So it's absolutely wonderful to be able to mix with all of these different people from all different countries and talk about owls. So here's the list of talks I want to go through and highlight, to spend a little bit of time on each one. So David Johnson's 15-year burrowing owl study. The second one there by Hannah is the northern hawk owl study, which has really never really been done before. So this is a real first for northern hawk owls, which happen to be one of the least studied birds in all of North America. Has anybody ever seen a northern hawk owl before? Aren't they cool? I mean, they are just super cool. The first one I saw at the World Owl Conference in '97, I was shocked at how small it is. It's not much bigger than a crow. So they're really small, but boy, they are feisty. I watched one buzz a great gray owl, and the owl was sitting there like that, and the hawk owl just went right over the top of his head, like the great gray owl just sat there and like he was like a gnat bothering him. So then David Johnson again, I put that one in there on purpose because in March I was down in the Everglades for 10 days. And I was actually in the area where those Florida burrowing owls are that he talked about. And that one's looking at the effects of artificial light. And there's a lot of it down there. And the development down there is terrible, absolutely terrible. If you look at, if you know where Cape Coral and Naples are on the Gulf side, and where Miami and all its suburbs are on the ocean side, just picture that you're getting a giant squeeze, and they're all moving inwards towards the Everglades and Big Cypress, and it's just getting squeezed to death. And then next one, trade composition of little owls in Europe. And then Carla's talk on great horned owl vocalizations. That was extremely interesting, and I would mention that she's been studying it since I think 2005, and also her co-author is Marjan Savelsberg, and she is from the Netherlands. She's a vocalization expert, and she's a trained musician. And so being a trained musician helps her with the vocalizations. So, I mean, she can tell you every little tiny sound coming out of a Eurasian eagle owl means this or that. So it's really impressive how the folks that are really digging down into the vocalizations actually really understand what's going on there. Because, you know, to a lot of us, myself included, I love listening to them, but I don't always know what it means. So, and then Rachel Doherty and company, barn owl split. Everybody's probably heard of the proposal to split the barn owls out into 3 groups. Well, not everybody's buying that. So that talk was dealing with that. JF Therian talking about snowy owl status and conservation. That is of interest. Scott Wiedenstall's talk on Project Snowstorm. Has anybody ever heard of that project before?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's, everybody probably remembers the giant eruption in winter of 2013. Is it 2013, 14, right? Yeah, I can remember seeing the snowy owl sitting on the Bay Bridge. It was incredible. So that triggered the beginning of the establishment of the snowstorm, Project Snowstorm. So we'll talk about that. And then Marcus Micah is one of the few people that is actually studying flame-related owls. Flame-related owls are extremely cool. It's one of the only owls I have not got on my life list yet. They are moth specialists. That's what they eat, moths. They will eat, from time to time they'll eat small mammals, but they specialize in moths. And Koning. This is absolutely incredible. This is a father and son, Fred Koning and Hank Jane Koning. 63 years of data. So they have studied the site since 1961, and they have documented an incredible number of changes in the landscape since they started. It's just absolutely amazing. I don't know how they keep track with all the variables. There's so many variables that have made that landscape change. New predators, new other raptors moving into the area, all the different political decisions on how to deal with this. So their study site is very close to Amsterdam. And so they have a lot of political things to deal with, as well as nature conservancy related things. So that's affected their study. And then Al Brezic from Slovenia gave a really interesting talk on climate change, impact on owls. He particularly looked at the competition and how it's impacted by climate change between two Strix owls, the Ural owl and the tawny owl. And I'll just preview that reminded me when I listened to that, and I listened to what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, reminds me greatly of the spotted owl and the barred owl, because those are two Strix owls as well with a very tenuous relationship. And then finally, myself, I gave two talks here dealing with contaminants. One was dealing with lead effects, exposure and effects of lead. It was kind of a comprehensive review. And the reason I did that is because everybody focuses on condors and vultures and eagles, and they forget about owls. So very few people have looked at lead in owls. And there's a reason for that. So I'll talk about that. And then the other one was dealing with a hazardous waste site where I monitored barn owls for a few years. And the contaminant there was arsenic. So you probably might remember this guy with a handful of burrowing owls here. That's David Johnson. And his study site is out in Oregon, Umatilla Army Depot. In 2008, there was only 3 or 4 pairs of burrowing owls there. And they got down to that low number because of mismanagement. The people that ran the land management there put a coyote control program in place. And that was aimed to benefit the pronghorn. The problem is it eliminated the badgers. Well, guess who digs the burrows for the burrowing owls? The badgers. Okay, so David got in there and he started putting artificial burrows in there. And so artificial burrows are a very common management technique to be able to try to improve burrowing owl numbers. And so the owls responded very rapidly to the artificial nest burrows. So they got up to 65 nesting pairs by 2012. And then they continued to increase. They maintained 92 nesting sites, 196 artificial burrows from 2013 to 2022, with an average 53 pairs of nesting birds annually. I just got an email from him earlier this week, and he's out there again right now. He's done 15 years, And he was going to hand it off to somebody else to continue the study, but he's out there now himself. I think he's had some health problems, and I think he's feeling better right now. So he's on year 16 right now, and he told me already that he's got 35 for 35 nesting pairs so far. So that's pretty good. So he's captured and banded pretty much every single owl out there every year. 2,800 individual owls banded, and outcomes of 608 nesting attempts have been tracked. And the data that he collects is just incredible. It's this long laundry list here of all of these things he's getting: clutch size, hatch dates, number of young reaching banding age, longevity data, aging data, migration dispersal data, immigration, emigration, mate selection, who's mating with who, mortality factors, which predators are impacting the burrowing owls, migration to winter sites, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, weather and vegetation, artificial burrow design, siting, spacing, and installations. So the artificial burrow process is ongoing. They keep improving it every year. So when they see something doesn't work, they fix it, they modify it, and so they continue to try to improve that. And also look at how these factors impact owl productivity and burrow maintenance. So the burrowing owl clutch size there is 8.8. So it's a pretty good number, range of 4 to 12. The males, interestingly, they winter in Washington so they can get back to the best breeding season, the best breeding sites first. So there's a race for them to get back to the best breeding sites. So if they're not in that race, then they go to California. Okay, so if they want to get back fast, they just hang out in Washington. Females have higher fidelity to winter burrows than to the breeding burrows. This is really interesting, and he showed pictures. I don't have pictures of this, but he showed pictures where the males, they decorate their burrows. And so you're talking about little pieces of plastic or aluminum foil or things like that. They decorate their burrows, and they know when you move their decorations. And when you do that, even an inch, they will go back and put it back. So you slide something over an inch, and they'll come back. When you come back and check, it'll be back where it started from. So they're monitoring all their decorations, which is really interesting. Burrowing owls do steal fruit from each other, not surprisingly. Recommendations, David's been able to recommend to land managers and others interested in enhancing or reestablishing burrowing owl populations what works for him. And then this was really interesting. He told me this at the meeting in October, that Native Americans have come out and they joined the project because they revere the burrowing owl. The burrowing owl is a sacred animal to them. And so they got interested in this, and so they're actually invested now in this project that he's doing out there, which I think is really cool. Okay. So here's the hawk owl, northern hawk owl. As I mentioned, it's one of the least studied birds in North America. They're a boreal forest species. Their global range is predicted to decrease a lot as the northern forests recede in response to climate change and also deforestation. You have to remember that we are pretty actively cutting down a lot of that forest for paper products every year. So there is that. So the research question that they were asking, Hannah and her colleagues were asking, is how far do northern hawk owls travel from breeding grounds, and do they establish a winter territory? So nobody knew that before this study. And they used what you're going to see this acronym a couple times in this talk, GPS-GSM. So GPS is Global Positioning Systems, and GSM is Global Systems for Mobile Communication. Okay, so in other words, like a cell tower, it's like a cell system. So you're combining GPS with mobile cellular capabilities. Okay, so a lot of the raptor researchers, that's what they're using now for telemetry. So she was able to put the transmitters on 11 owls. in northern Minnesota and southern Manitoba. So they also looked at eBird occurrence data up there, and they try to figure out what the species distribution model would be to provide insights into what the land cover use was for northern hawk owls and to identify which variables in the habitat showed a higher habitat suitability index. In other words, what are the variables that the northern hawk owls are preferring when they're choosing habitat? So winter home ranges were established, he found, and they were smaller than expected. So these winter ranges range from 2.11 to 34.75 square kilometers and were distinct from the breeding ranges. So they are setting up a separate winter range. Northern hawk owls selected for wetland habitat and were positively associated with edge characteristics in both of their analyses. But wetland habitat was found to be more important in Minnesota compared to Manitoba. Conservation of northern hawk owls is going to require understanding of the habitat use and range throughout the year, which includes the winter. So this study was extremely valuable in being able to fill in the blank as to what do hawk owls do in the winter and what habitat do they prefer in the winter. Okay, so like I said before, this is the first data on northern hawk owl winter habitat use. And so it's highlighting how important winter data is for informing monitoring and land management plans. Okay, this is the Florida burrowing owl. And this picture was taken by me 2 months ago in a lawn on the front lawn of a McMansion on Marco Island, Florida. And so we were driving through the island. Does anybody know Marco Island? It's a very ritzy island. It's very highly developed with expensive houses, and all their lawns are that deep dark green. You don't see any blemishes on them. They're like perfect lawns. And so every once in a while you see a little cordoned off area, maybe 2 meters by 2 meters, with a burrow in it and maybe some burrowing owls standing there, right in the middle of somebody's manicured lawn. And so that they're here. Cape Coral, Florida is where the largest number of burrowing owls are located right now. So David Johnson and his crew were interested in looking at the distribution of burrowing owl nests given land use and lightscape that they experience down there. As you probably realize, there's lots of different street lights, different intensity of light, different types of street lights. And so he was using that to be able to get an idea of where they choose their burrows in relation to that. So they looked at 454 nests with young in June 2020. They chose random points. Okay, so the idea there is if you choose a whole bunch of random points, you're going to be able to compare that with what you find in reality. And so then you can then say, you can make a relationship between, if it's not different than random, then they randomly picked it. But if it was different from random, then they chose that. Okay, so that's the idea here. So they're using these random points to be able to compare the selections, the nest selections of the burrowing owls. So they had almost 20,000 different street lights of different types and intensities. They had 5 land use types here, which probably would not be surprising for an urban area. There was some grassland, lawn, impervious surfaces like parking lots, roads, forest, and roads. So they set up some hypotheses regarding the nesting locations as they relate to land use and light intensity from streetlights. So I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to put all that stuff on there because it was too much. So I tried to boil it down a little bit here. So for all the different hypotheses, the random points were considered indifferent to distances to land use patches or locations of types of streetlights. So the results show that almost 100% of the burrowing owls nested in grasslands or lawns. And only 41.2% of the random points were in grasslands or lawns. Okay, so obviously they show a very strong preference to grassland and lawns. We found average distance from nest sites to streetlights was 49.7 meters with a big range of 3.9 to 166.2 meters. But the average distance from random points to streetlights was 62.7 meters with a range of 0.7 to 280.1 meters. So that also tells us that, well, that's reasonably close, but the distance in reality was less than that from the random points. There's 8 different types of streetlights in Cape Coral, ranging from 100 watts to 1,000 watts, and light ranged from each range from 9,500 to 110,000 lumens. Think about that. I mean, that's gonna burn your eyeballs out, pretty much. So they examined the nanometer frequency and color corrected temperature of each of the light types with respect to the distance of the owl nest and the random points. The light frequencies range from 1900 to 5000 K. So at 5000 K, that severely injures human eyeballs. That's too much. That's too much light. Higher light intensity resulted in nests being farther away from the street light than the random points, or not surprisingly. And the burrowing owls need their eyes to see. So overall, they found that the burrowing owl nests are distributed by availability of grassland areas and by light intensity. I put some burrowing owl notes in here. Mainly because I'm a burrowing owl fanatic, and also because I was just looking at them 2 months ago down there. So neither burrowing owl subspecies, there's 2 in the United States. You have the western burrowing owl and then you have the Florida burrowing owl, which are separate populations. And neither of them are listed in the US. But in Florida, the state lists as threatened the Florida burrowing owl. So they were listed 8 years ago. Declining in Florida, significant and rapid urbanization and development is the major threat there. Naples, Cape Coral areas on the west, and Miami and suburbs on the east are squeezing significant into the Everglades and Big Cypress area. So I mean, I was just down there and I saw it with my own eyes. I could not believe the level of development that is going on. It's just pushing into the Everglades. Burrowing owls down there, the Florida burrowing owls are only found in lands associated with heavy human use. So pastures, city parks, golf courses, airports, school playgrounds, sports fields, vacant lots, cemeteries, neighborhood yards. That's the only place you're going to find them. Florida burrowing owls rely on gopher tortoises to dig their burrows. So what happens when the gopher tortoises disappear? Okay, well, they are disappearing. They're not federally listed, but IUCN has them listed as vulnerable, and they're now considering updating that to endangered. So in my whole trip down there, almost 2 weeks, I only saw 1 gopher tortoise. So they're there, and the burrowing owls rely heavily on them, just like the western burrowing owls rely heavily on prairie dogs to dig their burrows. Gopher tortoises do that for the Florida burrowing owl. All right, so this talk was talking about this, and this, you should realize that is in the same genus as the burrowing owl, that is the little owl. And so this is found in Europe and Asia, and into Africa, into northern Africa a little bit. And so this study was looking at provisioning rates and prey composition for the little owl in agricultural landscapes, and there was 4 countries involved here. Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Slovakia, and Germany. So little owls associated with agricultural landscapes, and it's rapidly declining in Central and Western Europe. And they do use nest boxes, so it makes them easier to study. The key factor could be linked with food limitation during the breeding season. Reproduction success can be reduced if the food is limiting to the chicks. So to examine that question, they basically set up nest boxes equipped with cameras inside. And the setup was pretty cool. They had pictures of that in there, and they had videos showing the little owls coming out and back in and out of the nest box with prey items. So they had over 50,000 provisioned prey items that ID'd, and had 57 different broods across 4 countries. So they ID'd mammals as the highest proportion of provisioned prey items to the chicks, 37%, followed by earthworms, 28%. So the little owls are eating earthworms as well. Mammals also form the highest proportion during the first 10 days post-hatching, 48% of the biomass. Insect provisioning peaked 10 to 20 days post-hatching, 30% of biomass. And then earthworms after 20 days of hatching, 44% of biomass. So the young are getting mammals first, and then insects, and then earthworms. So the models that they used to analyze the data indicated that provisioning rate increased with higher temperatures, but reduced under rainy and humid conditions. So you could see a scenario there where climate change could have an impact on that. So the interaction between age of nesting and high quality habitats was highly significant, indicating that in territories with lower proportion of high quality habitats, provisioning rates were reduced with nestling age. So if you start cutting off their food supply and they get less and less food supply, that can affect nestling survival. So that's what they were seeing. So bonus information on the little owl. So Dries and his co-authors, David Johnson and Ronald Van Harksen, just came out with a new book, 2nd edition, The Little Owl, Population Dynamics, Behavior, and Management of Athene noctua. Cambridge University Press is publishing that. It just came out actually in January. And 539 pages, that's not a small book. That is a big book, and it's everything you ever want to know, and some things you don't want to know about the little owl. This is really cool right here. In embryonic little owls, 2 days prior to hatching, their ears actually move from asymmetric to symmetric. Think about that. 2 days before hatching, their ears, the position of their ears moves to symmetry from asymmetry. Little owls are more visual. They don't need asymmetric ear design to be able to help them get their prey. They're more visual, and so that's why that happens. In some other owls, they do require the hearing, and so their hearing stays asymmetric. The position of the ears stay asymmetric. Not in the little owl. Carla Bloom. All right, so complete vocal repertoire of great horned owl. So as I mentioned, she's been studying this for almost 20 years now. And her co-author I mentioned, Marjan Savelsberg, is a professional musician with a very trained ear, and her ears now are trained on owl calls. And so I think Carla has basically kind of co-opted her from her music world, and so now she's doing owl vocalizations. So basically, Carla has a bunch of captive owls at the International Owl Center, and so she's been observing and recording them for many years. She also recorded all the 18 wild great horned owls in her area there in Houston, Minnesota, observed over years 5 different online great horned owl cams in different states and provinces, visited 139 active great horned owl nests with banders in Saskatchewan, and viewed most of the great horned owl recordings in sound libraries. So she's really into the vocalizations here. Vocalization in great horned owl starts at 2 weeks of age, and it's innate. Parents don't have to teach the young owls anything. They already know how to do it. It's built in. Okay. So sounds can be produced and classified into 5 different main categories based on the inflection of the sound, number of syllables, duration, pitch, volume, method of producing sound, and behavioral context. Lots of different ways that these sounds can come to us. So 5 different sound categories. You've got the hoots, the squawks, the chitters, the squeals, and the non-vocal sounds. So so you're really breaking things down here with this. And so within each of those sound categories, you have different types of hoots, different types of squawks. So the hoots, territorial, with the male being deeper than the female, greeting hoots, emphatic hoots, staccato hoots. Squawks are largely variable. The double squawk could be an alarm, they think. Begging calls, so the juveniles can make a begging squawk. They also do quiet squawks if they're really close range to each other. Chitters, feeding the young, male feeding the female. Conversational, if the owls are just having a conversation, like a conversation, whether they're annoyed or screaming. If you physically restrain a great horned owl, they're gonna do that chitter call. And squeals can be done with copulation or broken wing type of thing, where there's extreme danger to the hatchlings. The mother will do that kind of a vocalization, a squeal. So 1 second here. Give me a sec. I mean, I just really can't go anywhere without doing vocalization. Is that what it is? Yeah. Where's the microphone? It's on.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to All Tech Lansing.
Not connected to the speaker.
Not.
There we go. Coming up. Use the microphone.
I couldn't resist.
I'll wait this.
Wanted to do another one here. So I have a non-vocal one here, I think. Hold that a second. Oh yeah. That's immature. It sounds like it'd be a chitter looking for food. Okay. All right, I couldn't resist doing that. All right. So you can see how complicated this could be to tease all these things apart and to try to know for any certainty what one sound is going to mean is difficult. So you have to be really into it and study it carefully and study you study the variation in all the different great horned owls. So that's why Carla has gone to all those different sources to be able to try to better understand this, and also got the musician Marjan Saluberg to work with her. So here's a couple of pieces of equipment that you can use to be able to monitor owl vocalizations. So you have the song meter is right there on the right, and that's the full size one, and they are pretty expensive. They run 800 plus. So they're pretty expensive. And so the microphone, there's the microphone right there. Okay, so it's almost like a field camera in a sense that you set up all the settings on it and just let it go, and it records everything for you. and the way that you want it to be recorded. The one on the left is an audio moth, and I have an audio moth here, and I'm going to pass it around so you can look at it. The audio moth that I'm passing around here, I've used it a bunch of times. It works very well. It's not in a case, but I could buy a case for it. But what I use a Ziploc bag for it. So you can put it inside a Ziploc bag so it doesn't get wet. You can put it up on a tree or wherever else, and it's going to record sound. And that cost me about $80. So it's pretty small, but it does the job. And it's way better than $800. So you could buy a bunch of those, and you could monitor the soundscape of a particular area for anything, but not just owls. But it's a nice little gadget to have. Okay, so here is the barn owl split paper. So Doherty et al. Looked at this. So basically, AOS doesn't recognize the split. Okay, so the international, IOC, International Ornithological Congress, I think that is, they do recognize it, but AOS doesn't. And the reason is because there's nothing besides genetic data. They don't have any non-genetic data. And so that's the reason. So that split there between American, it's American, Eastern, and Western. So there they are right there. So Western barn owl is basically European. American is North America all the way to Patagonia. And Eastern is basically Asian to Australia. So that has been recognized and split out by genetics. Okay, so what Doherty et al. Was doing is to be able to supplement that with morphological data. They want to be able to look at morphological and see if that supports this split. Okay, and so if it does support this split, then perhaps AOS will change their mind and recognize the split. Okay, so yeah, all right, let's see. Did I forget anything here? No, so they were basically comparing morphometric data of barn owls to be able to look at the validity of that proposed split. And another point here, barn owls are so widely distributed that basically, and they're so highly variable in morphology, it makes it hard to understand how are they related to each other. Okay, so that kind of complicates things. Okay, so they did a morphometric survey. They measured up to 21 different morphometric parameters on 261 live animals and 1,271 museum specimens. They did a data analysis on that, and all three of the proposed barn owl species units were significantly different morphologically. With Tyto percata, that's the one that would be here, being the largest body size, and Tyto alba, the smallest. Okay, so preliminary results that they have support the genetic evidence of 3 species units in the barn owl complex. So I remember her telling me that they were going to try to bolster their sample size so that they had a better sample size to be able to go to the AOS with to make their case. Okay, so now it's coffee break time. So coffee break time at the World Owl Conference. So you can see that they basically took really good care of us. They had all sorts of goodies here, fruit and pastries and muffins and all this stuff. Plus they had, you probably can't see it, but these are not only maple leaf cookies, but owl-shaped cookies. So these are owl-shaped. So we had some wonderful volunteers. They came in from a local, I don't even know what it was, a local organization of some kind. They came in, they provided our coffee breaks. They had all sorts of really cool stuff for us. So that was really nice. And there's some more things, including they had these fresh fruit skewers, which I had never seen before. So they had these, which were wonderful, and then there's some of the owl cookies and maple leaf cookies right there. So that was a fitting treat for the owl folks. So then we have J.T. Thernian's paper on status assessment and conservation of snowy owls across the circumpolar range. So as you might suspect, snowy owls are hard to figure out what's going on with them. They breed in a very remote area. They're wide ranging. They disperse all over the place. Plus they have eruptive behavior. So it's really difficult to get a handle on what their status is. So people have been doing long-term breeding surveys and indices during the winter period, and that suggests the world population of snowies is much lower than previously estimated. So this project was led by, that's an acronym there, that means International Snowy Owl Working Group. Okay, and that organization met at the meeting, and so that was there was a group of 5 of the Norwegian snowy owl biologists. Everybody in Norway studies snowy owls, by the way, and I can't blame them really. But I got to hang out with the Norwegians every single day of the meeting, and I got a snowy owl shirt from them. And if you look at the sleeve here, it's all in Norwegian. I can't read it, but I like it. I like it, but it's Norwegian. So it's a local prominent Norwegian wildlife artist did this shirt for them. And so the Norwegians gave me a nice shirt. I liked it. Okay. So, all right. So they're trying to figure out population trends and global status of snowy owls. So, so they're basically looking at genetic analyses and long-term databases. Is going to give the reasonable estimate of the world population of snowy owls. And they basically are coming up with a substantially lower population estimate, roughly 25,000 breeding pairs, but could be as low as 7,000 to 8,000 pairs than currently recognized, and decreased population trends across the entirety of its range, although not significant in a few locations. So some places they're doing okay, but in most places they're not doing okay. So they conclude the snowy owl warrants special attention across its range, and they suggest establishing new long-term monitoring programs to supplement the current efforts, especially within its breeding range. And then other recommendations for conservation action include addressing threats impacting survival and reproductive success, like contaminants. Contaminants happen to be a very big problem for snowy owls, as well as climate change. And you could imagine that as the magnitude of climate change increases as you get higher in latitude, these guys hang out in pretty high latitude areas, so the climate change impacts are going to be greater on them. And also migratory connectivity, they need to do more work in using telemetry and stable isotope analysis. IUCN 2017, the status of snowies got changed from least concern to vulnerable, which is bad. You want it to go the other way, not this way. So that's not a good sign for them. Scott Wiedensahl and company, Project Snowstorm. So that was, as I mentioned, in response to the eruption that happened in the eastern US in 2013, 2014. They started this program, or this project, to be able to monitor winter movement ecology, migratory behavior, and health status of this fascinating but enigmatic Arctic raptor. So it's taken a highly collaborative approach. It involves banders, academic, government agency, and NGO researchers, and wildlife veterinarians and pathologists, many of whom donate their time to participate in this. Fundings come almost exclusively from small, crowd-funded sources. They used Indiegogo, which is a crowdsource, tax-deductible donations from the public, and underwriting. They can get transmitter sponsorships, which really helps them a lot. the money that they can get, they could put on another transmitter on another snowy owl. From state or regional ornithological and birding groups. Project is used again, there we go with the acronyms here. The GPS, GSM transmitters that they're using. So they followed 115 owls in 17 states and provinces and generating a gigantic movement database, probably the largest one in the world for snowies. The advances in tracking technology are leading to greater accuracy in estimating snowy owl population sizes and trends. Obviously, they hang out in areas where it's very difficult to get to, so if you can put some kind of tracking on them, and that allows us to be able to sit in our laboratories or our buildings while the technology does the work. And here is a picture of a necropsy of a snowy owl. And some of you may recognize that is Cindy Driscoll right there. She is a wildlife health person for the state. She's over on the Eastern Shore. And so she's part of this Project Snowstorm. So they have already necropsied over 450 accidentally killed or salvaged owls. So they've got the world's largest data set on snowy owl health, disease, and exposure to environmental contaminants. And so the project's also partially underwritten important research, including the first comprehensive global population status and trend assessment for snowy owls. And if you want their website, there it is right there, projectsnowstorm.org. Owl calling contest. Oh, this was so funny. I just laughed for 10 minutes straight. It was so funny. So there's Carla. She's running the show. You can see that the judges are facing away. So this is a blind judge thing. So they're not looking to see who's doing the calling. But we had 5 people that were in there. I didn't enter it because there was too much work to do up front to get in it. And so I didn't have the time. I was too busy with other stuff. But so Roar Solheim is one of the Norwegian snowy owl guys. And so that's Sally, that's Sangeet Salis and from India. And then there's Marjan Salzberg from the Netherlands. She's the musician. And so they all did 3 different calls of their choosing, and then the blind voting to see who the winner was. And the prizes were amazing. First prize was well over $1,000 worth of stuff. So you had some really nice binoculars. You had really nice song meters and other audio equipment. And so everybody first, second, third place. And I think these 3 right there were first, second, and third. And they all were excellent. Their owl calls were excellent. So that was really funny. The whole room was just rolling on the ground laughing when this was going on. Okay, I'm gonna have to speed it up. So this guy probably, I mean, like I said, he's not on my life list. I have not seen a flame-related owl, but that's a flame-related owl. These are moth specialists. And so they were looking at prey items being delivered to the chicks, mainly moths, and also some orthopterans. So they looked at the prey delivered to the nest and the relationship to successful fledging. Okay. And then looking at female foraging efforts started to increase. So it started off pretty slow. Started off slow there, only 5% from 7 to 12 days since hatching the first egg. But after that, the females sped up their efforts and eventually exceeded the efforts of the male. Females seem to deliver larger prey items to the nest compared to their mates. And nest territories with fewer abundant invertebrates showed higher frequencies of vertebrate prey supplementing nest provisions. So what that means is, this, to me, it's a great example of an owl species highly dependent on insects, which are in the midst of crashing numbers on a global scale. So we have a lot of our small owls, burrowing owls, elf owls, flammulated owls, pygmy owls. A lot of them are heavily dependent on insects. And so that concerns me greatly that the insects are declining so badly across the entire planet. All right, I'm gonna have to go through the last couple really fast so I don't go over the time limit here. So 63 years of tawny owls. So some of the things that they saw here, that's the brown-faced tawny on top, and then that's the red-faced tawny on the bottom. So they showed up on the site in 1961. They've been studying ever since. And so Fred Koenig is the father, and Hank Jen is the son. And they showed pictures of Hank Jen at like 2 years old out there with his father. Brought him out there when he was doing his owl studies. So he's the one that actually gave the talk. The son gave the talk. Some of the most interesting things here: the jackdaws, which are corvids. They figured out how to get the tawny owls out of their nest boxes. They put sticks on the eggs. They started placing sticks on the eggs and cover the eggs up, and that got the tawny owls out of the box. Goshawks showed up, and they colonized the study site. They wiped out the jackdaws, but they also prey on the owls. And pine martens just showed up, and so they can get into the nest boxes and prey on the owls also. The climate change paper. This is tawny on top and Ural owl on the bottom. And so the Ural's a little bit larger. And so Brezek was looking at the effects of climate change on the competition between these two Strix owls. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of barred and spotted owl. So basically what they found here was competition is going on here, and that the Ural owls were actually having larger head lengths. And so in other words, they're getting larger in response to the competition. So the only way these guys are going to really be able to succeed is to be able to continue to have that continually change in body size that the owls have. That might be the only way that they're going to coexist. And by the way, they do interbreed, and they do have successful offspring. So that's just like spotted owl and barred owl. Okay, lastly, we can skip mine, really. I just did looking at exposure and effects of lead, and looking at prey selection and reproduction in barn owls inhabiting a hazardous waste site contaminated with arsenic. So the take home for the first one is people are not studying owls very much in regard to lead exposure because they don't think that they're scavengers. Well, they are scavengers, and they will scavenge anytime they need to. And so the problem there is that they're scavenging a carcass that has lead shot in it or lead bullets. Okay, and so so that's what the paper was about right there. They do scavenge. So I looked at 51 papers relating to owls and lead exposure. So you could see necropsies, non-lethal monitoring with feathers mainly, reviews, biomarkers, experimental, and field cameras. So there was one study that captured burrowing owls scavenging small mammals killed with lead shot. Most of the studies are from Europe. Raptor rehab facilities are the front line for lead poisoning, and owls have been shown to be sensitive biomonitors and environmental contamination. That was one of the papers that I gave in the 1997 World Owl Conference. Okay, last one, Crystal Chemical Company site. These are awful. This is all that black there. That's all arsenic contaminated water that eventually had to be removed. This is what it looks like on the ground right there. And so I actually found. So look at that number right there. So the soil contamination was 3% arsenic. 30,000 parts per million. That's 3%. So this place was seriously contaminated. It made the Superfund list. It was put on at number 34, worst in the country. So this place was disgusting. So that's where the owls live. That was the only building left on the site, and I crawled up there and I found owls up there. And there's some of them right there. And so the take home here was that these guys were eating katydids like crazy. So 37.4% of their diet by frequency was just one species of katydid. And they were eating them mainly in the spring, as high as 62.2% in the spring. So, but by biomass, mammals, of course, was the highest. Okay, their reproduction was severely affected. So if you compare it to clean sites, the number of eggs hatched, the clutch size, and the fledgling numbers were all way lower than those from a clean site. I collected primary feathers and prey items to test for arsenic levels. Barn owls from clean sites in Texas rarely ever choose insects as prey items, 0 to 1.6%. And mine was 37.4%. Small mammals accumulate arsenic, whereas orthopterans do so to a much less extent. Question, are these owls selectively choosing katydids as prey because they contain much less arsenic than the available mammalian prey? That's a really good question. I don't know. So there's our field trip to the International Owl Center. And thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, thank you for coming.
You bet.
For our speakers, we always have to have one of these coins, and since you're from the state, you probably want to put this side out because it's got the Thunder Goose and the MLS logo there.
Nice.
Thank you for being
Nice.
our speaker.
You're quite welcome.
Just a couple of quick things, because we always try to be respectful of the folks here. Thank you very much. Our next speaker isn't until September. It's going to be Dave Ziolkowski talking about an introduction to birding in the New World. And I hope to see many of you out either birding on May 11th on Saturday. There's also potluck at my place, so bring something along. I hope to see you at 6 or somewhere around there on Saturday. In the meantime, we'll see you out birding over the summer.
Thank you, that was extraordinary.
Thank you. Glad you liked it.
We're still.